Hello there, everyone, and welcome back to our third and final part in our discussion of movie trilogies. As you guys know, we are discussing 10 movie trilogies, and we are now on our top four in both of our rankings. Um, should I start us off?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. So, my fourth spot is the original Jurassic Park trilogy.
Okay, pretty
So, this is very different from my brother's list because his was number nine, and I'm putting it at a number four. So pretty drastic difference there. Couple of reasons for this. This is a trilogy where not all movies are strong, in my opinion. So why, Joe? Why are you putting it this high? I'll
Mm,
tell you, random
That's what
viewer.
that's what I'm wondering.
Yeah, I'll tell you, random viewer. As we know, Jurassic Park is iconic. Not only this trilogy and the movies in it, as well as Jurassic World and stuff, but obviously the World of Dinosaurs. But the first Jurassic Park is probably one of the most iconic movies of all time, and in my opinion, one of the best. I guess you could consider it sci-fi films of all time. Most likely, I think it's sci-fi. You would consider this. Starts off very, very strong. I think this is the strongest in all the Jurassic Park and Jurassic World movies, in my opinion. It brings us to something that everybody wants to know what the world would be like if dinosaurs were in it. Steven Spielberg is an absolute master in this. Not only gives us iconic lines, not only gives us iconic scenes, not only gives us iconic shots, but he gives us an iconic movie that probably everybody around the world knows and that it could translate to anything. Um, and then we get to the second one. Um, I feel like this is regarded as not the best, leap. Again, like I feel like we had that. We were going up. We were going up. Not that we crumbled in this one. I don't think we crumbled. Because I see what they did there. I see what they were going for in the sense of you have a baby T Rex. The mom's trying to get it back. You're bringing these dinosaurs off the island, and you're trying to get them to go to a zoo or whatever in New York. Really stupid move there. No, it wasn't even New York. It was San Francisco, I think.
Yeah,
Um, Stupid move on their part. Not like as in like I'm saying like the people in the movie should not have tried to bring dinosaurs to the United States
right.
or anywhere like near people. Especially try to create a zoo. But I do enjoy that it kind of introduced us to that idea of what it would be like if they were actually interacting with people in the real world. And then personally, I enjoy the third one. We get to the third one, and I don't think we close out super strong, but I think we close out pretty good in the sense of this Spinosaurus is the best part of this movie. It is super cool to see him on screen, and we also get iconic lines and shots in this one as well. And even though I feel like a lot of people find this film annoying because of some of the characters in it, but I feel like that's what makes the film really good. I like them exploring a lot of different dinosaurs in this, and that's why it is. That's why I think it's an enjoyable film. I also think it kind of gives us a little more of that fright that we see in the first Jurassic Park, and also I think that's why the Jurassic Park trilogy is so strong because in each of these movies they know how to do these little shots to really make you be on the edge of your seat and wonder. I mean, the classic one of the you hearing the stop and seeing the water in the glass move, seeing the objects may appear closer in the mirror with the T Rex, the raptors chasing the kids in the first one, this one, hearing the cell phone ring, and it's in the dinosaur's stomach. Um, the raptors in this one as well, the pterodactyls. There's a lot of stuff in this film that I feel like it takes you back to the original one. As a whole, it is not the strongest trilogy on this list by any means, but it is one of the most iconic. And it's not just up here because of how iconic Jurassic Park may be, but I think it starts off incredibly, incredibly strong. Probably the strongest start off on this list, maybe besides one other thing. And I think we see a consistency in the sense of them bringing new ideas in terms of what they're using dinosaurs for, because obviously we saw the introduction, then we're seeing the shift, and then we're seeing kind of the back introduction of what they're trying to figure out what to do with dinosaurs now in the world after the park didn't work out. So that's why I kind of feel like it deserves to be a little higher than mid tier, even though you can argue that something such as Captain America or the Dark Knight trilogy as a whole is above this. I just feel in the direction they go and the storytelling that is done in this trilogy is why I put it at my number 4 spot.
Yeah. No, I mean it's pretty solid. This is what I like about having these chill and casual conversations because I could see both sides of the argument. So it's always nice to hear your opinions when coming because we talk about this stuff all the time. So it's actually interesting to see like what your opinions would be like if we just didn't talk about it. Um, but yeah, I totally agree. So moving on to my fourth spot. Again, this was a swap between the fourth and the fifth place spot, at least on my list. So now in the fourth place spot, I have the original trilogy from Star Wars. For those of you that don't know, that encompasses episode 4, 5, and 6. So A New Hope, Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi. The budget for these movies was $765 million, and the box office was surprisingly only at a $1.8 billion. So it actually has probably the worst turnaround when it comes to movies on this list. Because I mean they were like three-quarters of the way to $1 billion, and they just made about like $2 billion. They did make their money back. Yes, they did make their money. And then looking at the critic scores, we see A New Hope coming in at 93%. We see Empire Strikes Back come at a 94%, and then we see Return of the Jedi come in at 83%. So, unlike the similar to the Dark Knight trilogy, which is why this was a toss up to me, we had the first two movies of the trilogy shine, right? Obviously the before it was called Episode 4, New Hope, it was just known as Star Wars. It launched the franchise as a whole. And it's definitely considered people's favorite movie. Again, their least favorite movie, depending on how you look at it. And then even when Empire Strikes Back come out, it's regarded by pretty much most of the fandom in the community as like the number one Star Wars project. And I think it is the most highly rated project on Rotten Tomatoes for Star Wars. I think besides Andor. I think Andor and Empire Strikes Back. Sorry, I had to sneeze. Andor and Empire Strikes Back are like the top two highly rated projects on Rotten Tomatoes when it comes to Star Wars. So again, we see that consistency of it going up in a positive trend when it comes to 94%. However, which is a shame because it's my favorite movie out of the trilogy. Episode 6, Return of the Jedi, does fall down to an 83%. Um, and honestly, I'm having trouble on figuring out why. I could see maybe some people didn't enjoy, the scenes on Endor as much, or maybe they just didn't enjoy the opening scene. I think a lot of people might have been bored with maybe Jabba's palace and maybe like those parts of the movie. Which I guess I can understand to an extent. Um, However, the Star Wars original trilogy is goated. I mean, it will be one of the best movie trilogies of all time. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and this is what gave us Star Wars. And because of these movies, because of that very first movie, we have a whole franchise now. I mean, we have two other sequels on this list because of this trilogy. So that just goes to show the extent of the influence it had. And again, we have some iconic actors. We have Mark Hamill, we have Harrison Ford, we have Carrie Fisher. The list goes on and on and on. We have Ian McDermott. So James Earl Jones as Darth Vader. I mean, so we have Alec Guinness as Obi-Wan Kenobi. So again, the list just literally goes on and on for all these star-studded actors that came out of this franchise. And again, based on how I'm ranking my list, I do put it, right on the cusp of top three because I do think that there are film trilogies out there that are more consistent and they are better. Um, However, again, the original trilogy will hold a special place in my heart, and it is one of the most consistent on this list. Again, it does have that drop off towards the end, but what kind of kills it for me is how much money it made back. But again, different times. The 70s and the 80s were different times. I mean, what they had to go through to even produce these movies was amazing. And I mean, if you haven't watched those documentaries, I mean, please do because they're great. I mean, they're on Disney Plus. I mean, it's literally breathtaking to see like what they have to go through to try to put this like film in production. Um, and then, like I said, the little drop off in ratings is what kind of gives it that mid tier for me. So this was definitely a toss up between the original trilogy and the Dark Knight. So either of those could have went fourth or fifth for me because I think they are both very consistent, and they kind of have like the same opinion for me. So yeah, so that's why I have Star Wars: The Original Trilogy as my fourth place spot.
Very interesting. So coming into my top three now. Starting off on my third spot, I have Star Wars: The Original Trilogy.
Okay.
Um, so this was one that I knew was going to be towards the top. Star Wars is super iconic. Once again, love it, love it, love it. Um, it is something that everybody probably knows across the world, especially the original trilogy. Obviously, the fourth, fifth, and sixth movie: A New Hope, Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi. Um, Star Wars, this original trilogy truly introduced a new era of sci-fi and a new world that filmmakers from the moment George Lucas showed this on the big screen incorporated for till modern day basically. Um, it is one of the most consistent trilogies on this list, if not probably tied. Actually, I think all my top three are tied with how consistent they are. Um, but this is a trilogy that gets better as it goes on. But inherently, I don't necessarily think one is better than the other. I think they just all have different components in them that make them the best. I think A New Hope introduces us to this new world, and it does it with these amazing characters and with this amazing villain. And then Empire Strikes Back is regarded as one of the best Star Wars films and people's favorites in the trilogy. And we see a lot of heart, a lot of action, and a lot of iconicness in this. And then we get to the sixth, but technically third one in this trilogy, where we close it out beautifully. And again, we don't need to go into depth of exactly what happens in these films because we can talk about Star Wars all day long. But regardless of how much money it made or the turnaround, again, the way these movies were made back then was just astonishing in how they did it, and truly the creativity of what was brought to the big screen. This is a totally fresh new idea that nobody, this is George Lucas's baby, and I think that's why it's such a good trilogy, and why it deserves to be in the top three is just because of how, not only how iconic it's become and still is, but how also it holds its originalness till this day. And it probably will until whatever the end of humankind or something like that. But I just feel like it gives us so much, and it doesn't feel like it crams again, even though like this is a whole new world essentially. It doesn't cram a lot into any of these films, and I feel like it takes its time and it really builds up, and it closes out beautifully. I feel like it is very hard to start a movie, start a trilogy that nobody knows these characters. Nobody, all they have is an idea of some sort of sci-fi flick, and it ends up turning into this whole universe with probably one of the best villains in fiction, and arguably one of the best heroes, and then you have one of the best crews as well. So I mean, also it being able to push out so many more projects from this one trilogy is why it really does rank in that top three. Is just because of all it created, its fresh new ideas, and just how consistent they were able to be and how they were actually able to get better and better as time went on. Even though, you could argue that the middle one could be the best out of the three. I just feel like it went better as it went on and on in terms of what they did, in terms of how it looked, and just in terms of its story.
Mm,
So I mean, that's why it's the one that's starting off my top three.
very well said. Very well said. So starting off my top three, I have Star Wars, the prequel trilogy.
Hmm.
Um, for those of you that do not know, Star Wars, the prequel trilogy encompasses episodes two, three. I'm sorry, one, two, and three. The budget for these films was around 343 million, and the box office made about 2.5 billion. And honestly, the reason why I put Star Wars the prequel trilogy in my top three is for me, just piggybacking off of you, it's all about consistency. However, this type of consistency is not what you are referring to. We've seen a couple of trilogies on this list where, over the three movies, they keep somewhat consistent scores. They're either low 80s, high 80s, low 90s, high 90s. However, at least when it comes to this list, Star Wars, the prequel trilogy, is the first trilogy on my list where we see a positive trend in the movies throughout the whole entire trilogy. Now, I do agree that obviously episodes one and two are not highly rated. Episode one, The Phantom Menace, is currently at a 51%. Episode two, Attack of the Clones, is at a 65%. And
Okay.
episode three, Revenge of the Sith, is at a 79%. However, because they are rated so low, they are it was always improving throughout the trilogy. I mean, we started here, with the Phantom Menace, and then we went up with Attack of the Clones, and then we kept going with Revenge of the Sith. So this is the first trilogy where you see that there was constant growth throughout the whole trilogy. It's not like one movie started out good and then it came crashing down, or the first movie was good and then the rest of them were just like okay. This was the you know first trilogy, at least on my list, where you saw the critic scores and the audience scores for these movies continue to increase and increase. So not only was the direction and the directing going in the right direction, but they were able to tell the story leading up to the original trilogy so beautifully that they kept improving with each film. Now, I know episode one, The Phantom Menace, gets a lot of hate, um, but if anything, over the years, I've learned to love and appreciate the Phantom Menace. Qui-Gon Jinn is one of my favorite characters. He's one of my favorite Jedi. I think Darth Maul is like one of the best antagonists to come out of Star Wars. He has like one of the most beautifully well written stories. Um, and this is one of the only movies that kind of like detaches itself from the Clone Wars, because obviously this movie takes place before Attack of the Clones and the official Clone Wars begins. Yes, we see droids in it, but we see droids in it for a different reason. And obviously it shows the introduction and the beginning of Anakin Skywalker. And right off the bat, from a very very early age, we see some of the attributes that will lead to his eventual fall to the dark side. In the first movie, we see the attachment that he has to his mother. And obviously, according to the Jedi code and everything, that is something that could lead to the dark side. And then in episode two, we see that further attachment to his mother when he keeps having those dreams about her and crying out for help, and it's plaguing him, and it's troubling his mind. And then, besides his mother, we also see down the line that eventually, when he does find his mother, and his mother unfortunately dies in his arms, he lets that sadness turn into anger and rage, and then he goes on to slaughter a whole Tuscan village. So again, we see more tendencies growing of him, slowly turning to the dark side, and how his impulse and his rashness could lead to these decisions. And then finally, in the third movie, we see his dreams of his mother be replaced with dreams of Padme. We see that same fear that led Anakin to slaughter the Tuscans in episode two lead to finding a way to become stronger and wiser to save Padme, which eventually what leads to the ultimate decision of him turning on the Jedi Order, becoming Darth Vader, slaughtering the younglings, and and striving for more power in order to save the ones he loves. And ironically, what is so beautifully done with this journey is that the one thing that he set out to do, he couldn't do. And in the end, he lost Padme. Yes, his children were born, but he did not know that at the time. But he thinks he lost Padme, he lost his children, and we see the eventual downfall of Anakin. And it is so well done over these three movies. It is one of the most heartbreaking character developments and arcs that we see in any film franchise. The best scene from episode three is when Anakin is waiting for Mace and the rest of the Jedi in the Jedi Temple, and he's looking out the window, and you see a single tear fall down his face. That just shows how much emotion, how much worry and sadness and anger is flowing through him. And again, we see that same exact shot when he's on Mustafar after he just slaughtered all the separatist leaders. We see him crying again. So we see him in such an internal conflict in the third movie. Like it's almost like heartbreaking to watch him because you know what he's doing is wrong, and he knows what he's doing is wrong, but he thinks that it's the right thing to do in order to save the people that he loves. And I think the prequel trilogy does a great job of introducing Anakin Skywalker, showing his story, and how events in previous movies will lead to his eventual downfall. And obviously, it shows us Obi-Wan Kenobi, it shows us Padme, it gives us the clones, it gives us the Clone Wars era, it gives us Darth Maul, it gives us Darth Tyrannus or Count Dooku, it gives us General Grievous, it shows us the rise of Darth Sidious, and it gives us some beloved, side characters, Yoda, Mace Windu, Kit Fistu, Kial Mundi, Plo Koon. The list goes on and on. And that is why, in a nutshell, that it starts off my top three list, the number three spot.
Wow, very well said. Very well said. I gotta say, I definitely do agree with a lot of the points you made, and I feel like the prequel trilogy is often overlooked, in the sense of its storytelling. And, I feel like the original trilogy takes it over because of how iconic it is. And, people tend to forget, how important the prequel trilogy is to Star Wars, especially with what um, projects were, able to come because of it. And, just some of the small characters in it, how, minute they would have been in this, that, there's some of the most iconic and important characters in Star Wars today.
I'm kind of
So yeah,
excited because we're up to our top two. So depending on what your top two is, we are going to have the same top spot.
I
So
think our top spot is going to end up being the same.
okay,
Because I know you have, I know which two you have left.
right, and I know which two you have left.
Yeah.
So if our top spots are the same, then we could just talk about our number one spots together. But if they're different, then we'll just do it separate.
Yeah. All right. Now, I was actually kind of tossing up my top two spots. Um, it was very hard to pick this top three, especially. Um, but just based off of a couple of different decisions, my top two. I mean, I'm sorry, my second spot is Guardians of the Galaxy trilogy.
I love that. All right. So it's confirmed. We have the same top spot. I love that. I mean, I was so afraid that you were gonna choose how I thought you were gonna choose, but I'm actually pleasantly surprised that you chose that as your number two. So please continue.
Yes. So this is another one where this was his number six, and this is my number second. Um, now, Guardians of the Galaxy, in my opinion, is the best Marvel trilogy. And you could say recency bias, you could say whatever you want, but in another episode we will fully break down the Guardians of the Galaxy trilogy. But just for now, again, we understand the statistics of it, how much money it made in terms of where it went in Rotten Tomatoes, and yes, we did see a fall off from the first one. Um, Guardians of the Galaxy, James Gunn's baby. He took a team that was not known throughout most people. I did not know who the Guardians were, nor did I really care who the Guardians were. And he introduced a side of Marvel that I feel like almost I would explain to as what George Lucas did in terms of Star Wars. Sci-fi was popular before, George Lucas made Star Wars. Marvel and that stuff was popular before James Gunn did Guardians. but they both brought in something that nobody really knew about, even though some, mainly comic book people would have known. Nobody really knew about, nobody would have cared about, and he turned it into something that is so well known and that people could fall in love with just out of nowhere. Now we see we see iconic characters in this, such as, especially in the most recent one, we see Rocket Raccoon, we see Groot, we see Gamora, we see Star Lord, Peter Quill, and we see Drax. Those are, the main five Guardians that we see, and then obviously in the last one we end up with Nebula, Mantis, and so on and so forth. But we start off very, very strong in the sense of Peter Quill, just regular old guy, stolen, on Earth, abducted by aliens, blah blah blah, is a thief in space, and then he finds this, ragtag team of, just other thieves and no good people, and just trying to find your place in the universe. And then they end up becoming probably one of the best families that we see in the Marvel universe and in any sort of comic book universe. We see a story of all of them coming together and trying to find their family in the first one. Second one, we see Peter Quill try to find his identity and, form that lost relationship with a father. Because in the first one, as we know, he lost his mother. So he had no family besides the Ravengers that he knew. Um, we see, we find his father in the second one, and we see, what terrible things he did to not only his mother, but Peter as well. And but we also get introduced to a little more story from other characters. And what I like is in each of these movies we see little by little stories of these other characters, such as how Drax goes from what he was in the first one to what he ends up on in volume 3. And yes, they were in other movies, such as Infinity War, Age of Ultron, and Thor Love and Thunder. So we did see him in other projects, but we do see development in this trilogy as well. We see it all the time at Rocket. We definitely would saw it from the first one till the third one, especially with it being centered around him. um, we see Nebula's change. We see Gamora's change. We see Mantis's introduction in this one. Um, excuse me. And we even see the rebirth of a new Groot. Obviously, yes, technically you see it at the end of the first one. But we see the start of, a new Groot and what that Groot ends up turning into from, into the third one. And then the third one, we have, even though we see a rocket centered story, I feel like we have the closing out of a family. I feel like the first one, this family is developing, they're growing together, and they're all realizing that they care and they love each other. Second one, we're seeing a family member's story, and we're seeing what is happening in these other characters' lives around this family member, and whether or not they're going to stick with them through it. In the third one, we see this family member on the verge of death, and what this family is willing to do to not only get him back, but to just make everything better. And obviously, we see the backstory of this one member. So there's a lot going on in this trilogy. Also, the music taste is absolutely phenomenal. Best music in any Marvel movie, I don't care, and some of the best soundtracks in any movie, period. Um, and also the look, the colors, the humor, everything just hits spot on. Like if I had to, just like very few times there are perfect films. This is almost a perfect trilogy, almost. Um, but just with the way it was closed out, it secured its spot at being as one of the best trilogies in my opinion. Um, So I mean, I don't want to go on and on because I'm not sure how much time we have. We'll get into Guardians a little later on, but no, that's why this is at my second spot. It is such a strong trilogy, such an enjoyable trilogy, and it's full of heart, it's full of love, it's full of laughter, it's full of sadness, and I feel like it has everything that you could check off in a book.
Yeah. No, I mean I agree. It was well said. I'm just gonna like quickly breeze through my second one because I just want to make sure we have enough time to just briefly discuss the top choice before we have to close out the meeting. Um, so for my second place spot, I put the Captain America trilogy. For those of you that don't know, the budget for that trilogy was 560 million, and the box office was 2.3 billion. So we see it did very well there. The critic scores were pretty consistent throughout the whole trilogy. So we have Captain America, the First Avenger, at an 80%. We have Captain America, the Winter Soldier, at a 90%, and we have Captain America: Civil War at a 90%. Again, the consistency did this for me. It is again the second one that I have on my list, besides the first one on my list that was consistent throughout all of its movies. The first one was a pretty solid foundation. Captain America is a very beloved character. Chris Evans does a very good job as Steve Rogers and Captain America. And from there, it just continues to rise. I mean, The Winter Soldier is the best movie for him, where it kind of like help has him like fight his past and kind of like conquer his past. And I do agree that Captain America's Civil War does fall off a little bit because it does kind of outreach from Captain America. Even though it does kind of focus on his beliefs and what he thinks is right, it doesn't really focus too much on him as a character as a whole. But overall, I think it's a great trilogy. It was very consistent, definitely a very well beloved character with the MCU. And his character development, in these movies and then outside these movies is, probably one of the best throughout the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And that's why it's at my top two. And with the little time we have left, I wish we could talk about this more, but we're gonna quickly go over our top spot. So we both have the Planet of the Apes trilogy at our top spot, and I'm actually really happy that you did. Um, so the budget for these movies was $567 million, and box office wise, it only made 1.6. So it actually surprisingly did not really make that much money. However, these scores were very consistent. The first movie was an 82%, the second movie was a 91, and then the final movie was a 94%. So we saw that upward positive trend throughout the whole trilogy. Caesar is one of the main, one of the best protagonists ever created. He is such a beloved character. The whole story of like the what if scenario, like what if there was this simian flu that took out the world's population, there was more of like a apocalypse in like a different way. Just you really fell in love with the apes and what they were trying to build and what they were trying to figure out throughout the whole trilogy. And again, the movies got
I
consistently
agree with the apes.
the movies got consistently better, and it was just a pleasure to watch. I'm really excited to see what I believe the fourth movie in this franchise is called: The Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, and I think he's going to be closing out the franchise. So I'm really excited to see what that is going to be about. I know it's supposed to, I think, focus around Caesar's son, so that's going to be pretty interesting. um so yeah, but I mean, this is why it takes the top of the cake for me. That's why it's at number one on my list. Even though it didn't do too well, percentage wise when it came to the budget and the box office, it was very consistent all throughout, and it's probably one of the best pieces of sci-fi fiction out there. Which is why I have it number one. So I mean, if you want to quickly add anything, and then we could get on with our outro.
Yeah. So one word, Caesar. Um, the Planet of the Apes trilogy obviously is, like my brother said, it's a what if scenario of apes basically taking over the world. Um, there's a poster in for this trilogy where I believe if you get on like a steelbook or something, it shows basically a regular ape face, then the war paint, and then Caesar's old face. That one picture just gives you a hint of where this trilogy goes and what direction it goes. The first one we see how these beings, I would call it, are treated, in a zoo by humans and everything, and then how they rise up towards the end. And not rise up where they're just going crazy, is where you actually see they get abused mentally, verbally, physically. And we see the story of Caesar and his caretaker. I'm sorry, I don't remember his name. Develop in this one, and then towards the end, we see the Eves finally get their chance to get out and figure out what's going on. And then in the second one, we see that build, and it's called War Planet of the Apes. They wait. This is when they're waging war, basically on the humans, and this is where we see truly how they develop in terms of a species and how close they come to humans. And the third one is just it's it's so good. It's so beautifully shot. The story is amazing, and I just feel like Caesar develops so much, not only as a character throughout this whole trilogy, and not only Caesar, but all the apes alone. Even you could argue in the second one, they have one of the best villains. As in Koba, and it's just ape on ape.
Mm,
And it's hard to talk about with how little time we have, but also Andy Serkis's portrayal as Caesar is, if you could get nominated for an Oscar in this category, I would have gave it to him
mm,
for his portrayal as Caesar. And I truly believe Caesar is one of the best leaders in fiction, in movies. He's on par for, with Optimus Prime and Captain America and other leaders of that sort. And just the way this character presents themselves, and focusing really on that development, and the movement, and just how this could happen, and realistically, if it did, again, it's hard to say, but it is such a fantastic trilogy. And honestly, I don't like watching the first one because it makes me sad.
yeah.
Um, but I just think it just gets better and better as it goes on. And it really, you wouldn't think that, yes, there was a Planet of the Apes, way back when.
Mm,
Um, but you wouldn't think that this trilogy would be as strong as people regard it to. And I'm glad it is both of our top ones. A little surprised that it is both of our top ones. I didn't think you would put this high. Well, actually, I thought you would put it high, but maybe not number one. But yeah, that's gonna close out our both our number one spots in our trilogy discussion here on Two Sons Podcast.
yeah. I mean, there you go, guys. I mean, this was a fun episode. I mean, I'm glad we didn't tell each other our list ahead of time because obviously there were some shocks, there were some surprises. I'm glad we finished out on the same note.
Yes,
I wasn't too shocked that you had it like definitely your top three. Honestly, I thought you were going to put Guardians above this. I'm sure you thought about it, for a
I
second,
did.
but I'm glad you put Planet of the Apes first. I would definitely love to continue talking about this more, but unfortunately, we're running out of time. But we'll be back to discuss all these trilogies and their own episodes and stuff like that. So just, stay tuned for that. Thank you guys so much for coming out today, where we just discuss a random group of trilogies and we put it in our own top 10 list. And, we just, used our brains and figured out where we thought, the trilogies went. And, obviously our lists were pretty different. But this was really fun. If you guys enjoy this casual content, let us know. You can follow us on social media at Two Sons Podcast on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. That is Two Sons with an O, not a U, because we are two brothers. Also on YouTube at Two Sons Podcast. Again, that is with an O, not a U, because we are two brothers. The podcast will be released fully tomorrow morning. The first part of this will be released on YouTube in the morning tomorrow. And then because me and my brother are going on vacation next week, I will release the two other parts I'm thinking that the second part will be released this week on Friday, and then the third and final part will be released next Wednesday. That way, you guys have some content to watch and listen to while we are away on vacation. But we are going to be unplugging. We are going to be taking a break next week. So do not miss us too much. Please explore our vast library of podcast episodes and enjoy these more recent episodes. But thank you guys for coming out tonight. This was a pleasure to talk about. Whenever you listen to this, have a great day, have a great afternoon, great evening. Please be safe. Do not do anything stupid. May the force be with you, and you all have a good night.
yes. Once again, like my brother said, Two Sons Podcast, all on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. That is all Sons with an O, not a U, because we are two brothers. Thank you guys for coming out and listening to another episode. We really enjoy doing these episodes just on casual talks and ranking things and just a bunch of stuff. Please, I would love some interaction on any of the socials. Hit us up, DM us, whatever it is. Let us know some ideas that we could keep on doing. We'll keep on pushing content. And like my brother said, just everything he said, just listen, because we are running out of time. So I hope you guys have a great night, great evening, great day, good, 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 good. And, catch you on the flip side.
Have a good one, guys.